Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the brand new Lorraine 50T. This is a tier 9 French reward heavy tank that will be available with the 1.16 update release and the new battle pass that it brings. It's one of two new tanks that are available in the battle pass, as I announced on the channel roughly about a month ago. This and the Cobra will be the two new toys that you can pick up. However, just because they're new doesn't mean they're great. Unfortunately, we're going to be unable to get our hands on the Cobra for about 3 months, and that is because the Cobra costs 24 battle pass points and this one currently costs 18. And seeing how you're only able to get 21 battle pass points every 3 months, and there are going to be 3 seasons worth, while you're going to be able to get both vehicles if you pony up the gold to be able to get the premium battle pass, there's no way to get the Cobra for the first season in the first 3 months. If that was all confusing for you, the bottom line is this is the only tank that's available now, and I'm going to be letting you know whether it's worth your hard-earned battle pass tokens or whether you should frankly spend them on something else. To be able to access the Lorraine 50T, if you want to in the next 3 months, you're going to have to advance to at least stage 40 in each of the 3 chapters of the battle pass, as well as purchasing the premium battle pass for each of the chapters. Then you can enter the items for tokens shops, and there the Lorraine 50T heavy tank will be, and that beautiful British Cobra tier 9 medium tank is just tantalizing me. I really want to be able to play that one, and I know all of you want to see it, seeing how I know how you all love the Caliban so much. Now, the Lorraine 50T priced at 18 battle pass tokens means that it has a lot of stiff competition. You could get yourself a 7772 and a Char Future 4 for the same price as a Lorraine 50T. Or you could get yourself an AE Phase 1 and a K91 PT. Or you could get yourself a Kunterpanzer and still have enough tokens to be able to pick up the Cobra as well. Albeit not in this season, but remember, your points do not expire until the end of the year. So you're going to have 3 seasons, each of 3 months, to be able to get your hands on as many tokens as possible, and then you can decide how you want to spend them. I should mention that new for the Battle Pass this year is that you don't only have to spend your Battle Pass tokens on tanks, you can also spend them on bounty pieces of equipment. So you could get yourself the brand new Bounty Turbocharger, which I will be definitely talking more about over the next couple of weeks on this channel. So before I get stuck into the gameplay, let's compare the Lorraine 50T to a variety of other tier 9 heavy tanks that it will have to compete with. Immediately we notice that the 120mm that the Lorraine 50T is packing has very poor damage per minute. In fact, unfortunately for the Lorraine 50T, you have to go all the way down to the bottom of the list of tier 9 heavies to find a tank that actually has worse DPM than that, and that is the recent WZ-114. But remember, this Lorraine 50T, it's not a premium tank. It's just a reward vehicle, and so it won't be able to make bonds, and it won't be able to make credits like the WZ-114 does. The fact that this vehicle has such bad DPM without having good alpha damage like the 114 has just absolutely makes this tank feel absolutely blooming terrible. And unlike the 114, because its alpha damage is so low, I really feel like I have to use a gun rammer on this tank, because trust me, doing 400 damage with a 14-second reload, you are not going to be handling many situations in that way. All of these other tanks are pretty much packing 20% more DPM than the Lorraine 50T. And if we're looking at the Emil, it's pretty much 50% more DPM, and that thing has an autoloader. It's wild that Wargaming would give this thing such bad damage per minute, and I really can't justify it when I look at the rest of the statistics of the tank as well. So one thing that this tank does have, which is nice, is 264mm of penetration. That's better than all of the other tanks in this comparison, but unfortunately, when you look at this tank's premium rounds, they only have 308mm of penetration. This means that unlike tanks like the AE Phase 1, which are packing 340mm of high explosive anti-tank, or even tanks like the Concepts, which still have 310mm of high explosive anti-tank pen, which has more, and remember, doesn't lose anything over distance and can penetrate up to 85 degrees of angled armor, the Lorraine 50T just truly feels like it's lacking, with worse gold rounds than on the AMX M4 MLE 51 Tech Tree tank. And remember, that's the stock gun on the tier 9 French Tech Tree tank. So far, bad news for this tank with regards to its firepower, but how about its gun handling? Well, it has awful aim time for a tank which has this low alpha damage. 3 seconds aim time feels like it might as well be measured in minutes in this day and age of World of Tanks compared to all of the other vehicles in this comparison. And even the auto-loading Emil 2 with the higher alpha damage per shell has a better aim time than this. Combine that with less than impressive dispersion values when you're moving, and by far the worst dispersion values when you turn the turret on this tank, which is literally double that of most of the other vehicles in the comparison. This thing feels like it's aiming forever. One thing that is really nice about this tank is the 10 degrees of gun depression, but yeah, 3 out of 4 of the other vehicles in this comparison are packing equal that or more. So it doesn't really feel that special for a tier 9 heavy tank. So when is this tank actually going to get good? Well, it's actually kind of the mobility with the Lorraine 50T. This vehicle has a 60 km/h top speed limit, which actually makes the vehicle the second fastest tier 9 heavy after its tech tree counterpart, the AMX 5120. The problem that I found with this vehicle is that while its top speed is great, its reverse speed isn't exactly special, and its power to weight, it's kind of in the middle of the pack here. And also the tank's ground resistances, while they are the best in this comparison, they're not the best by much. And so a vehicle like the Concept 1B, when you get field mods and a turbocharger, actually is way faster than a Lorraine 50T, which we can see, thanks to Tanks GG, doesn't even manage to get up to its 60 km/h top speed limit, even on hard terrain, unless you improve it with field mods, premium consumables, and crew skills. Outside of this pretty cool top speed limit, there's really nothing else to like about the mobility of this vehicle. Its turret traverse is 30, run-of-the-mill in this comparison, the tank traverse is 30, and we can see that it actually has the worst traverse speeds in this comparison, which is baffling considering it's meant to be one of the more mobile tanks. So now let's move on to the armor of the Lorraine 50T. Hopefully it's got something to like here, and I can tell you it is definitely not the hull armor. The hull armor on the Lorraine 50T is pretty much shaped like a Lorraine at tier 8 premium, but it is significantly thicker. But even though you are packing 90mm of upper hull armor, and you've got 100mm on the lower plate, this still means that, yeah, you've got like 150 to 200mm of protection. And even if you use this tank's 10 degrees of gun depression, your upper hull still gets penetrated by 200mm of penetration 100% of the, well, not 100% of the time, 50% of the time if they have 200. But who's got 200mm of penetration at tier 9? This thing's armor is really abysmal, and it also only has 30mm of armor along the side where the tracks are, which means that if you try to side scrape in this tank, you end up getting overmatched by all 91mm caliber guns. This tank's hull armor is truly horrendous. I can't clarify that enough, and it makes a tank like a Conqueror look absolutely incredible, which is definitely saying something, as that is meant to be one of the weakest things about the tier 9 British tech tree heavy tank. I must say, however, the turret armor on this vehicle is rather nice, but that's only frontally. If you're not angling the tank at all, or shall I say using its gun depression, it does have some problems with the mantlet both above and below, and it had quite a few high penetration rounds just randomly going through it. It does have a weak point on top, but it's not prominent. And if you use the vehicle's gun depression, the turret armor does get significantly better. And while I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting out in front of things that are firing premium rounds at me, at least now your weak point on top is hidden. And if there is one thing to like about this tank, it is its hull down capacity when you are pointing your gun towards your opponent, because as we can see, even if you angle slightly, it becomes incredibly weak from the side. And if we take a look at the side profile of this tank, this was probably one of the easiest vehicles to hit that I could possibly imagine. It's huge, it's thin, it gets overmatched, reasonable penetration, high explosive rounds can go through the side of the turret, through the hull, and they're going to easily go through the lower part of the hull. It is truly horrendous with regards to its turret armor. And when I take a look at all of the other tanks in this comparison, which are packing just as good, if not better, turret armor than the Lorraine 50T, it really makes me wonder if this thing even deserves to be called a heavy. Hit points wise, this vehicle is also lacking. It does have a touch more than the Emil 2, but look, that thing is the apocalypse of a ridgeline with regards to its turret armor, as well as having an autoloader and bafflingly higher DPM. So you can see I'm really trying to scrape the barrel to find things to actually like about the Lorraine so far. And to cap it all off, unfortunately, ladies and gents, boys and girls, this thing only has 380 meters view range, the same as the AMX M451 and the Emil 2, and unless you have an incredible crew and you're using a premium consumable, you are going to have to use coated optics on this tank to be able to spot your opponents at half decent distances. All in all, I'd say this tank has some of the least impressive statistics I have reviewed tier for tier in the game. There's a couple of things to like about this thing. The accuracy is good, the standard penetration is good, the top speed is good if you ever manage to use it, and it does have decent frontal turret armor. But apart from that, this thing is an absolute stinker. I feel like I really want to use vertical stabilizers on this vehicle to improve its terrible dispersion values. I feel like I want to try and use a gun rammer to try and make its lowly 400 alpha damage usable because its damage per minute is so darn low. And I also feel like I want to use coated optics on the tank to be able to improve its terrible view range. And also maybe a turbo or improve grousers to try and let it actually use some of that awesome top speed limit that the tank has. And unfortunately in World of Tanks, you don't have 4 or 5 equipment slots. And so I decided to go for vents, turbo, and gun rammer on this vehicle, which definitely means that my view range, even with a half decent crew here and a premium consumable, is only at 424. Although I have to admit, once I get periscope electric drive field mod, this should be able to help out the view range a little bit. And maybe when I get recon on my commander as well, that it might start to get to a more usable level. But remember, I'm using a premium consumable and vents on this tank to make it even reasonable. In my second equipment loadout, I still feel like I need to use vents, turbo, and coated optics on this tank and just, well, whatever. I'll give up the DPM of the vehicle to be able to achieve what I feel is still a fairly lowly view range of 466 for a heavy at tier 9. And this is because one of the only ways that I felt that I could play the vehicle would be to be that kind of race into a frontal position and then try and go hold down against my opponents and try to lock down an area of vision. The only problem with setting the vehicle up like this is now your DPM becomes just totally atrocious. Less than 2,000, which really isn't going to cut it at tier 9, probably even let alone at tier 8 or tier 7. Field mods wise, I'm going to be taking all-terrain suspension to try and improve the ground resistance of this vehicle to allow it to use the top speed. This is a real tricky one. On most tanks, I will always try and improve the accuracy. However, remember this vehicle actually has pretty good base accuracy, but horrendous aim time for this gun. And because I don't really want to end up using vertical stabilizers on this tank because I want to try and improve other areas of the vehicle, I'm actually going to be trying out using the improved aim time and making my accuracy slightly worse on this vehicle. I'd thoroughly recommend to take the view range upgrade, and then for the final field mod, I'd probably take the reverse speed and sacrifice a little bit of gun traverse. And if you're looking for what you should use for your secondary slot category, if you want to use a turbo, go for the mobility. If you want to use a gun rammer on this tank in both of your slots, I'd recommend to go for the firepower instead. And so ladies and gents, boys and girls, I think that's quite enough chatting. Why don't we get stuck in with the gameplay? Alright, so I'm going to be jumping into Lakeville in a tier 10 game here, and I have to admit I was very concerned with the fact that they had 2 Kranvangs on the enemy team, as well as a variety of other vehicles that will be able to go hold down. I'm going to be using a gun rammer, vents, and I'm going to be using a turbo on this vehicle. What you choose will be up to you in the end. I felt like the only way that I could really make this vehicle work was to try and pump up that speed to actually get into a position first, and then to have some firepower to be able to try and handle the situation, or at least try and defend myself. So firstly, I want to clarify how I was able to get my hands on this vehicle. I actually ended up downloading the NA server again, logging into an account that I had some gold left over where I had to buy myself loot crates to be able to open them up for you all many years ago, to be able to let you know what chances you had to actually get vehicles before wargaming became more transparent and actually put the drop rates on top of the loot boxes. So I ended up actually skipping the battle pass stages on day 1 so I could get my hands on this vehicle. Ended up costing me, I think it was about 36,000 gold. Yeah, that was a little bit painful, especially when I figured out that this vehicle wasn't even really a truly exciting tank to play, and also didn't have very appealing statistics. So yeah, thanks for that one, Wargaming, for not getting me a press account with this vehicle on. Yeah, that one was not very cool. Do I recommend spending so much gold to be able to skip the battle pass early? No, it always baffles me. It really baffles me why players do it. Now, I can understand for me, I paid the money so that I could be able to get the content for you early, and so that I could stream it yesterday on Twitch early to be able to let all of you know, my audience, whether it would be worth doing for yourself or whether you've got something to be excited about, or more importantly, how to actually fight these things when you're going to see them on the server with people who will spend 30,000 gold to be able to skip to get the tokens to be able to have it on day one. It definitely wasn't worth it for me, and I totally don't recommend to actually skip the stages of the battle pass. I think it's just silly when you think about it. Unless you know that you're not going to play World of Tanks for the next 3 months, there's no point in skipping the stages early. You don't get any reward, any benefit for skipping the battle pass. All you're doing is spending your gold that you could invest into other areas of your account, and you're spending it to do something that you could have just slowly grinded your way along, and then if you don't complete the battle pass in time by the end of the 3 months, then you could have spent that gold. Why not play for the next 3 months, see how much you're going to do, and then if you really, really, really want to get those last few tokens and get the last few goodies that are eluding you at the end, then you can spend the gold instead then. So it baffled me how many Lorraine 50Ts I saw on the enemy team and also on my team. Now, there's something very important that I want to mention about this tank, and it's something that you might notice, and that is that, frankly, Wargaming have just really failed in every way with its development. Are you noticing how the shells are kind of coming from the left here? Now, this is clearly a mistake that Wargaming have made, where you're actually looking out the viewports to the right-hand side of the gun. And this is awful for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's really distracting to have the shell coming from the left. Number two, you can't tell when your gun is actually around a corner, and so you have to go around a corner to be able to compensate. And I also found that I had to aim slightly to the right of the enemy vehicle to be able to hit my shot straight. It baffles me that Wargaming haven't even had the quality of testing on this tank to realize when clearly your viewports are on the right-hand side of the tank, and why didn't they adjust the viewports to instead be where the gun is? They've made this mistake on countless vehicles before. One of my most recent memories was the K91, which I believe the viewports are actually underneath the gun, which made it almost impossible to play the K91 because your viewports were below, you had to overexpose your tank, almost expose your hull armor as well, and so you didn't actually know when your gun was just over a ridge. And so the way that I, for a while on the K91, actually played that was I would auto-aim at the enemy tank, go forwards until I could see that my reticle was actually over the ridge line, and then fire. That was a pretty good snapshot on the E100. I was baffled how that one went in there. And it's just, it's really poor quality control by Wargaming. I must call them out on this, that they haven't managed to check that. You could have, it was instantly noticeable, and if you'd given this to the community contributors early to be able to review, then maybe they could have released a patch before the server was going to come out. And it's crazy for me that people are going to spend 30,000 gold skipping to be able to get this tank, and they're probably not going to realize why the kind of gun isn't just working how it should be. And that's because you're not even looking out where the gun is. And it's very distracting, and it's also awful in a situation like this, because I might think that I can actually see around the corner, whereas my shell, did you see how it almost just grazed the rock in front of me? So I hope that Wargaming is going to patch that out. So far, what have we seen for the Lorraine 50T in this game? We've seen that I've driven around, I've penetrated tanks, I haven't really bounced too much this game, but luckily for me, my team have played in a way where they've been distracting enough that I have been able to still get my cheeky shots in. I think that one actually hit the rock in front of me, and the M60 manages to put a 350mm heat pen into the side of my tank. This was a fairly uneventful game for the Lorraine 50T. We just got to drive around. I never really felt like I had the pure DPM that I needed to be able to cut through the situation in an exciting fashion. And I just felt like I could still use my speed to be able to get into a position and expose my turret, but I never feel confident in the tank. And there's so many things to not like that I ended up getting completely frustrated during my play session in this vehicle yesterday. So I'm really trying hard to still be objective today to give you an idea of what the vehicle's capabilities are. But let's jump into the next game. Alright, so we're rolling out on Pearl River, and I'm going to use a turbo, a gun rammer, and vents on this tank. The reason why I'm going to do that is I'm going to try and use my speed to be able to take a prominent position and then trying to use my gun depression to defend it. That's the goal. Let's see if we can try and make it. And it was quite funny how much I was being welcomed. Sometimes in nice ways and sometimes obviously in a little bit more dubious ways to the NA server yesterday. I don't think he's here. Yeah, I don't believe that. It's adorable. I like it. Thank God I've got the anonymizer these days. Otherwise, having like a big QuickyBaby on the NA server is pretty much putting like a crosshair over me. No, but in all honesty, a big thank you to my undoubtedly passionate NA audience. It was a pleasure to be able to play on the NA server and to have like a new tank to be able to play on it. I just wish it was more of an exciting new tank, not gonna lie. So yeah, did you see how the gun just comes from the left? Means that I missed the AMX M454. Wargaming, fix your game. Come on, it's a new tank. I guess I should cut you some slack from that. But I guess the reason why I'm maybe a little bit salty is because we weren't given this vehicle early. And if we were, if the community contributors were given this vehicle early, I would have spotted it, and then Wargaming would have had time to address it. But no opportunity to be able to play the tank early, and I have no idea how your testers didn't manage to let you know. Alright, so we're going to now try and pop up, fire a shot into the lower plate of the AMX M454, and we bounce our regular round. So now, instead, we are going to be loading some gold against the higher tier heavy. And it's bizarre how this tank is pretty much like that tank, but just has terrible hull armor, and is marginally faster, but just has abysmal DPM. The problem is that the tier 9 French heavy tank, the AMX Emily 51, doesn't have terrible DPM, doesn't have abysmal hull armor, and all this tank really has compared to that is an extra 2 degrees of gun depression. And that's what I'm going to use against this AMX M454 here. I'm going to use the fact that I have 2 extra degrees of gun depression to be able to harass this player. And whoa, nice shot right into the lower plate. And I know that if I really try to use just the extremes of the differences in our gun depression here, I should be okay. So my Skoda T56 just plows forwards. Okay, bro, I'm going to back you up a little bit. And I'm actually going to try and drive maybe in front of the player here, as you can see, to try and block him. But then I see that the AMX M454 is unable to get the shot. Let me clarify. When I say to try and block him, I mean block the shot from the enemy in killing my friend. I did not mean that I wanted to block his damage, because I'm pretty sure he would have been able to fire out his 2 shells at that time. I know I keep going on about this, but it really is just so distracting seeing the shell come from a part of the vehicle that I am not looking at, and how you have to just constantly keep adjusting your shells. I'm going to have to go not quite as far around the corner here compared to the view range, if that makes sense. I should be able to fire fairly early, but, well, I wanted a clean shot anyway on the E75. Alright, so we've managed to do what we needed to do across this flank, but do you notice what's happening behind us? Yeah, that is a big glut of tanks that will be coming after us. We're going to come around the corner and put a shot into the AMX M451. Now, there's one thing that I want to highlight in all of these engagements. It's just that I feel like I'm constantly waiting in this tank to not even do that much damage. Really, the DPM on this tank was so incredibly frustrating for me that even though we've been pretty much continuously firing for 3.5 minutes here, or, well, we've been continuously firing for what feels like most of the battle at the start, I just don't really, I feel like I've achieved what a tier 9 tank is meant to. I've got many tier 8 heavies that would have done just as well, if not better than this. So I asked the Moistion on my team for a little bit of backup here, but the Moistion just seems to be trying to run away from his troubles. I think that a lot of the rest of the world kind of feels like that, ignoring the T95 and the IS-3. So I feel bad now because I have to let the Skoda T56 fall in this scenario, and there's not too much that I can do apart from to finish off the IS-3 too and be able to get a bit of a revenge shot. I asked the Moistion for help again. I say that I'm requesting fire on the T95, but once again the Moistion completely ignorant of the troubles of the impending disaster that seems to be behind them. And so you know what, I've tried to communicate with that Moistion. I can't help you in that situation, and I'm not willing to die. So this game is neck and neck. We're up by 2 kills, but we're actually down by 1,000 hit points. And so I decided to try and use my mobility of the vehicle to be able to go up and try and flank my opponents. There's one thing that I want to highlight here. This doesn't really look very fast for a tank which is meant to be focused on its speed, right? We're down to like 22 uphill here, and I'm not saying it's slow for a heavy tank, but it's not fast for a heavy tank that's meant to sacrifice so much about the vehicle to be able to get this kind of speed. pretty much every other heavy tank that I'd be playing in my comparison, apart from maybe the Emil 2, and maybe also the AE Phase 1 marginally, would have been faster up that slope. Concept 1B would have been up that slope as if it was almost not a slope. If we'd been playing in the AMX Emily 51, I think that vehicle would have gone up at just the same kind of speed. And unless you're really able to utilize that maybe 40 to 60 kilometer advantage or more, as we can see here, but it doesn't have the traverse speed. See how much I had to slow down in the corner because of the lack of the traverse speed. It's this tank which has got an identity crisis. It kind of wants to be a medium, but it's not quite a medium, and Wargaming realized that you can't really give a medium tier 9 heavy tank hull armor, or should I say turret armor, and let it get away with it without making major sacrifices in other areas. I'm thinking about maybe possibly ramming the Centurion, but I think I'll probably get myself into a horrible state here. But in retrospect, I wish I had. I wish I'd rammed that Centurion, but I just didn't want to drive out in front of the T-95, because in this situation, if the T-95 figures he can't manage to go through the Object 705A here and instead decides to engage me, I'm not going to be very well. And I can see even the T-95 thinking about it there for a moment, and I figure out, if I die here, there's still a blooming good chance that my team lose this game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, unfortunately, have to leave another one of my allies. And this is what this tank was doing to me. It was forcing me to have to just not play in certain situations and have to run away. Now, I understand that. If I want to play like a Leopard prototype and play like this, I'll play a Leopard prototype. And at least with a Leopard prototype, I feel like I've got a super accurate snipey gun. I'm way faster than this, and I've got 420 alpha damage with my shells, and I've got probably a better reload than this tank has as well. I just had to make these decisions that felt like I had to be a bit of a spectator in my games. It's quite funny how I've got like people answering for me in chat who are clearly watching the stream. And somebody asked me, how is that 50T? And I just say awful. I probably could have done a way shorter video here today, but you know what? Whenever a tank comes out, I want to put it through its paces, and I want to give it a fair shout, because I know that some of you, maybe this will be your kind of game style or your gameplay. But for me personally, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I can tell you that this vehicle is not my personal cup of tea. And I don't think I'm being subjective when I say this, because I look at so many other tier 9 heavy tanks that have so many other things going for them. Be they better alpha damage, be they the fact that they make credits and bonds in the form of the Stridsvagn K. It just has so little to love and so much to hate, all the way down to Wargaming's just pure lack of quality control with the viewports on the side of the turret, which makes the gun feel incredibly awkward for now. I'm really disappointed with this tank, but I also need to take a step back and realize if Wargaming had given it a really good damage per minute, then it could have been some kind of, and they'd maybe given it a little bit more power to weight ratio, they'd improved the ground resistances a little bit. We don't want to have constant, fast, hold down monster heavies going into the game. So I would argue with Wargaming that it's becoming impossible for you to release a vehicle that has such a good turret and a heavy tank that can go at 60 kilometers an hour and have to then remove all the statistics, file them down in other areas, and still make the tank fun. So I feel like this is as far as it goes with regards to a heavy tank that wants to be fast and also still wants to have a good turret, that it's just taken away from all of the other statistics of a heavy tank that make it fun. Be it the hit points, be it the alpha damage, be it the DPM, be it the hull armor, or also maybe even be it the view range to enable the vehicle to be able to spot back when it's on a ridgeline. I really did not like the Lorraine 50T, and I have to admit the two games that you saw today were pretty much cherry-picked. I can say that in the couple of hours that I played this tank, I didn't really have any moments where I felt like it was the vehicle that was doing the work. I felt like I was flaying myself to be able to try and get it to work, and while my average damage is not awful in the tank at 2,800, I know for sure that I would have undoubtedly done way more in every single other one of these tanks in this comparison, while achieving more wins and also probably having more fun to boot. So our first game in Lakeville, we managed to get a first class medal We finished top on experience, second on experience actually, behind the Kranvang, who did 6,700. And in our second game on Pearl River, this time we finished again second on experience and second on damage behind a Bofors Tornvang, which undoubtedly has a very similar kind of gameplay of low DPM but consistent ridgeline play. But that tank's at tier 8 and it makes really good credits as well. And so all in all, the Lorraine 50T, is it worth your 18 battle pass tokens? For me personally, it's not. If you don't have all of the other reward vehicles from the previous seasons, I think you're going to have more fun in them. And I also think that the upcoming Cobra, the tier 9 British reward medium, will be a lot more fun than this vehicle. And I would probably also think you're better to spend your tokens on buying bounty equipment to make better tanks better than purchasing the Lorraine 50T. But nevertheless, if this looks like the tank for you, if you don't want flashy DPM, if you just want consistent standard pen, 10 degrees of gun depression, and enough mobility to be able to advance into position, and some turret armor to be able to survive when you're there, then maybe this will be the vehicle for you. But I think there are a lot better tanks, even at lower tier, that you could be playing. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today for my tank review. Really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the Lorraine 50T in the comments down below. Do you want to get your hands on one, or are you going to spend your tokens elsewhere from the Battle Pass? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.